This is the Door Knocker Podcast, where we dive into the explosive growth of the sales industry. We take an in-depth look with the industry's top talent to uncover what has made them successful as salespeople, leaders, and entrepreneurs. We believe all of life's opportunities are just behind the next door. With that being said, opportunities knocking. I'm your host, Zach Ross. Yo. So today we have my partner in crime coming on to give you guys the real shit. Lee, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good, Zach. How are you this morning, brother?
I'm doing great. So why don't you intro yourself to everybody outside of here that doesn't know you?
So I'm Lee Barber. I'm co-owners of the Door Knocker podcast here with you. Own an Arcadia solar dealership in Las Vegas. Been in Vegas for 42, 43 years, somewhere in there. Spent some time back and forth to California, but everything is focused right now around the podcast and the solar business.
42 years in Vegas.
On and off, yeah.
Where'd you come from? California?
Yeah, so interesting story. My mom was in a hippie commune back in the 70s.
Come on.
Yeah, swear to God. My dad had 2 wives.
No way.
It was the thing to do. My sister was born, they all lived in the same house in this big hippie commune. It's called the family. They still meet today.
No.
In Northern California, there's 2 barbecues. And yeah, so there was a guy named Tarinjava Roy. And in India, if you're a prince, you have a few wives. And so everybody that was in his circle thought it was cool to have 2 wives, my dad included. So I was born in June, and my sister Autumn was born in October of the same year. Yeah, so that's my beginnings, and that was in Northern California. So I was born in a hippie commune in a house off of Haight Street, Haight and Ashbury, in San Francisco, California. And then we spent a year or 2 up in Northern California in Sonoma County, and then my mom decided that wasn't a great living situation for her. So she moved down to Vegas where her family lived. And I've been here primarily for a good portion of my life. Some situations back and forth to California with my side of the family up there, but a lot of Vegas time.
Okay. What was the guy's name? Tarinjava
Roy. Everybody called him Father. Really cool guy. I've actually listened to it. It wasn't, one of the negative kind of Jim Jonesy cults. I wouldn't even call it a cult. It was definitely a family gathering. I've actually listened to some of his tapes he was recorded. He was just very spiritual, into the universe, the power of attraction. I remember large groups of people just sitting around in groups of 30 or 40 smoking chillums and just having
What's a chillum?
It's like a hash pipe, So this is, I could remember this when I was 3 and 4. Yeah. So they would just have these spiritual conversations. So it was, and all the people still gather at barbecues, all the kids, I still know all the kids. We're all still friends on Facebook. It's a great group of people. Yeah, great group of people. But it was, 2 wives was the thing, which I couldn't personally handle.
Man, dude, No, thank you. One is plenty.
One is plenty.
So, your dad had, your sister, wow, that's a lot to take in all at one time. I didn't even know that. So that's the first time I'm hearing about that. So you guys moved to Vegas. Your mom's kind of running away from this thing, and it's like, I kind of have a similar story. So you guys moved to Vegas. How old were you then? Like 3, 4?
No, I think I was closer to 2, 1.5 or 2. Yeah, and my dad, the story my mom told me later on was that my dad actually flew down to Vegas to try and win her back. But, I think initially, just from the stories that I heard over the years, that in the beginning, she wanted to make him happy. And that was the culture of everybody that was in that group of people. And so I think it's one of those things where it sounded like a great idea at first. But then when you get into the reality of, splitting personalities and people in marriage like that, I just don't think it's, and now being married myself, I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. You share a lot spiritually with your wife,
right.
And to split that union up and have another person. I think it sounded good.
Yeah.
So my mom left, and my dad came down to try and save that, but he was unsuccessful. So she stayed here. Her mom and her sister were here in Vegas at that
Oh,
time.
okay.
So I think I was 1.5 or 2.
So that puts us at like what, 1970? I'm just thinking like what was Vegas
I
like
was
back
born in
then?
75.
Yeah, so what was Vegas like then?
Well, I don't remember
you-
then. I remember, so my memories of Vegas really started in the 80s. In the 80s, it was still a really odd mush of the mafia and cowboys. It was cowboy mafia.
Yeah, the Mormon cowboys, right?
It was crazy, because you still had some of the gangsters from the East Coast running some of the Nevada properties. They were on the back end. I think the FBI had started catching up to that. And you can see some of that in the Mob Museum. But there was this really wild, wild west theme. I mean, all the casinos you would go and it was cowboy theme, literally cowboys and Indians themes. Some of the casinos back then. So, yeah, that was Vegas, and it was. We lived on Eastern and Russell, and it was almost desert, man. There were dirt roads out there, so it was. I've seen a lot in Vegas change over
We
the
got to
years.
give the people, so Eastern Russell's like the east side of the strip,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit south. Right now, the first house I ever owned was off of Eastern and Russell, Eastern and Hacienda,
Okay.
on Latigo Drive, right off of Horsehide.
Yep.
So yeah,
Imagine that as a dirt road.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was 6 years ago, and it was the hood.
Yeah. A lot has changed.
I lived in the hood.
A lot has changed.
Yeah. So yeah, I always loved Vegas history because it was just it was the wild, wild west for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So you and your mom come here. It was just you guys, her family was here. So what kind of was your upbringing like? Like what was your early days, like teenage years, etc.? What was that kind of like being here?
Yeah, so I'll go into. I want to share my history with the listeners just so they understand who I am today and kind of the secrets to my success. But I had a fairly tough upbringing. My mom was my mom was a pretty severe alcoholic for my entire childhood. So when she moved here, I don't remember what it was like with my dad, but she got married to a guy named Russ, and he was actually a prospect for the Hells Angels. And so
Yeah.
there were times in my I was 4 and 5, and some of my first memories were of motorcycles in the front room, and just the kind of people that hang around that type of crowd. And she was actually on the back of Russ's motorcycle, and they were following their friend Bear, who was on a 3-wheeled motorcycle, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
made a U-turn over a hill, and Russ ran into him. My mom flew off the motorcycle, and she was in a body cast for months. Russ was decapitated. Her husband was decapitated, and Bear burned alive in the motorcycle crash. He died. So they both died on impact. My mom lived. So I remember going to the hospital. It's one of my first.
Wow.
That household and those incidents were some of my first memories. And I remember going into the hospital, and this is early 80s. We're talking 81-ish, 80,
Right.
81.
Yeah,
And my
yeah.
mom was literally in a cast from her neck down. And I think I stayed with my grandma. I don't remember the after. There's certain things that really stood out, and that was one of them. So, when she came out of that, I think the substance abuse and the alcoholism, from the traumas of her life, looking back, losing John, my dad, and I know that always was her greatest love, and then Russ dying. I think that just really contributed to an emotional instability and caused her alcoholism to go into greater and greater and greater defect.
Yeah.
And she eventually married my sister's dad, David, but she was an alcoholic the entire time. So to kind of sum it up, my childhood was tough. It was very tough. My mom was a big woman. She was 6 foot. She wasn't heavy. She was just a big. All the
Wow.
women in my family are big. They're
Wow.
all 6 foot. So when she would drink, it was intense. My schooling got affected dramatically by it. And then in my teenage years, I and this is, and I don't want to focus too much on my past, but I do want to unpack it a little bit. So in my teenage years, I got into some pretty heavy alcohol and drug use with my mother. She became addicted to crack cocaine, and then when I was 14 years old, I got addicted to crack cocaine with her. And looking back, I really just think I don't think it was misery loves company.
Right.
She just loved me so much,
Right.
and I was rebelling against some of her uses. So I think it was easier for her get me involved in that. And so, my teenage years were just extremely chaotic. We were homeless for numbers of years, living on Fremont Street, where my mom supported us in not the best ways. I saw some things and lived through some things for many years that I don't think any um, child should live through. Um, but yeah, it was tough. It was very difficult, and it warped my sensibility when I went into my adulthood. So,
Right.
yep.
So pretty powerful message. So, it's funny. My mom, she a long time, like way before me, she was dating a guy who was an HA. They would ride out all in California, and she like had my mom's like they come from like the gypsy world, so they're very like superstitious.
Hmm.
And she had a dream of like, oh, like I can't remember the guy's name, but he like was like a dream, and he was like in the newspaper, and it was like a picture of him, and he was dead, and then the next day he got ran over by a semi truck. And so you always have weird, like the motorcycle world is like a whole, I mean, the outlaw mentality is a whole thing, but then like just the possibility of dying is every second, right? So I guess like that living life to the fullest in that sense. So what was like Fremont Street like back then? I know that like for a long time it was like department stores, and then it kind of changed. And then what was it like back then?
It did change. So, back then it was long before Fremont Street was covered. And, I think most recently in Vegas's history, Zappos came in and really re-innovated the downtown Las Vegas district. When I was growing up, it was bad. I mean, it was the hood. So even upper Fremont, all the way up into the hotel area,
Right.
like as you got into the Golden Nugget at night, there is people doing what they need to do to try and elicit money to get crack and heroin, and there's people shooting up and smoking crack in directly in upper Fremont towards the hotel district. And then lower Fremont is like seedy, filled with, and as you drive through it now, a lot of those hotels are shut down and gated off, but those were the $30 a night hourly hotels.
Yeah.
It was not
Yeah.
and the weird thing is like that was just my environment.
Right.
It was literally, and you and I have talked before, and I'm in recovery. I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous. But I've listened to people tell stories of their childhood and thought, wow, that was a bad childhood, and not even reflected on my own. And it wasn't for me, everything for me that was going on in my life seemed natural. It seemed normal. I didn't know another way. I wasn't drinking to fit in. I didn't use drugs to feel cool, because it was really the opposite. I mean, there were some times, when you're young and your mom is supporting your crack habit, and you're, breaking into stuff and trying to support a crack habit. I mean, there were just some times where it was just tough, man. It was really difficult. And the weird thing is I had never known another way. So I wasn't around normal school kids. I wasn't around, and it's not a boo-hoo story,
Yeah.
because it really wasn't like, and I think that's really what made my adult life a little bit more difficult was what I went through in my childhood. My perception of reality, my perception of spirituality, my perception of, how a normal human thinks and perceives emotions, the cognitive behaviors of a normal person without that type of trauma were completely at a loss to me. I had no clue of how any of that operated. So it just was, but Fremont Street was rough. It was no joke. It just was no, I mean, it's not like, maybe Hell's Kitchen in New York or something. It's not that bad. I mean, thank God. But it wasn't what it is today, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, and so at this point, you don't really see anybody working. You don't like have like a gauge of like work ethic, really. I mean, other than like I can presume that a habit like that probably takes a little bit of work ethic to keep up with, but in the sense of like, real actual business environment. So there's no gauge there. So when do you start like working? Because I mean, are you like a 10th grade dropout or something?
I dropped down. I barely passed ninth grade, so I
Ninth
dropped down
grade.
to 10th grade.
Yeah,
Yep.
same with like my girlfriend didn't. I think she didn't pass 10th grade or something. And so you don't pass. I mean, we don't graduate high school. We're not
No.
we're not like going to Harvard here.
Mm-mm.
We're not going on our mission or nothing. Like we flunk out of freshman year of high school.
Mhm.
And then when do you start working? Like when's your first job?
Well, to be honest with you, it was in prison. Um, so we'll back into it a little bit. So my mom was here. She went to jail numerous times. Um, I had the first time she went to jail for a few months. I went to live with my grandmother, who couldn't handle me, so I ended up, and my family. I have a at that in that time when everybody was still alive. I had a great family. My mom was kind of the black sheep. So they tried to deal with the situation, but I ended up just leaving, and I would be homeless. And my mom was getting Social Security checks. So I remember I went down. My grandma went down with me to get her property out of county, and we were able to get her bank
Oh
card.
yeah,
So my
right.
grandma was issuing me $600 or $700 a month from my mom's Social Security, so I could live in this, shithole. And of course, I wanted to live by downtown.
Yeah.
So there were these periods where she was in jail, and she had gotten an inheritance when I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old, and it was like $20,000, and we literally smoked the entire $20,000 in drugs, and there was, I think, a couple $1,000s left, and I remember convincing my mom that we needed to move to Northern California, back up to where my dad's side of the family was from, and we packed what little belongings we had and a dog, and we moved up there, and wherever you go, there you are. And so the behaviors and addictions that we both had were still there. They changed. My mom changed into primarily alcoholism. I went into pretty severe methamphetamine addiction, and I was up there for about a year and a half, and got myself in enough trouble to get my first prison sentence. So I was in Sonoma County.
How old were you?
I was 18 when I started going to jail for that, and I was 19 when I went to San Quentin.
Okay.
So San Quentin's the reception center for the Northern California prison system. So my first job, to answer your question, was later after that, and we can go back to that, but it was in Vacaville State Prison. So San Quentin shipped me to Vacaville, and it was on a yard crew. So I was, took me, I think, 3 or 4 months to get a job, but I was, a lawnmower. That was literally my first job.
And how much were you making mowing lawns in prison?
I think it's like 8 cents an hour.
8 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And then what do you have to use for that? Like, is that just to buy commissary? Like, what are you using with 8 cents an hour there?
it's primarily commissary. So you end up with, and I didn't have any restitution. The guys that have restitution get a chunk of that taken out. So you're making $35-$40 a month, right?
Right.
It's your basic hygienes. If you want coffee, at that time in the California prison system, you could smoke bugler, so you could buy a couple cans of bugler, and that's what I was spending all my money on. It's like one stick of deodorant and like 3 cans of bugler and a jar of Folgers, and
Call it a day.
I'm ready for the month. And just getting out and being able to do something on a yard crew was productive for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're 19. You've never really earned any, like, I shouldn't say legitimate, but legal money, right? You're not
No.
like out like,
No,
you're hustling, but you're not like working at Sears on the weekends or
never.
something.
No,
Yeah.
I never had anything close to it. Well, actually, when I was 14, I worked at a gas station as a full service pump boy. And I
Old days,
remember
yeah.
I lost that job. It's a terrible story, but I was literally smoking crack it was right when the crack addiction started. And I was smoking crack in like the freezer. It was not, and obviously I got fired from that. And it was just incomprehensible for me to maintain any inkling of a normal. I was just so lost, Zach. I mean, if you can imagine, going through the traumas with my mom, and my mom got remarried to my sister's dad, David, and we had a very testy relationship. There was a lot of, I don't want to say beating, but paddling,
Yeah.
severe punishments. So I went through a few years of that, and to back the story up, my mom left David. I came home from school one day, and I had 2 suitcases in a truck, and we left. They had moved to Louisiana for a year. And so I just came home from school, and she was taking me and my sister back to Vegas. And it was, it was just so traumatic. Everything
Right.
was traumatic. And she was always drinking. And then when I was 12, I started drinking and smoking marijuana. So by the time I just had no cognitive perception. So no, there was no jobs. There was no normal reality. I didn't have, it's funny. I was talking to Misty, my wife. She's an only child. And I really kind of grew up as an only child. My sister Ursula was taken away, with friends and Like I was asking her about her friends and how she grew up, and I just didn't have friends. I had a few friends in my later teenage years who were all very similar to me, but no, there was no to me it was normal, but to the rest of the world it was just stunning. But no, normal jobs, no, definitely no working at Sears, none of that. Yeah,
Yeah, there's no.
yeah,
I mean, I
no,
get the pump and the gas thing. We all have our first like kind
hmm
of intro. So
yeah.
so you go. You okay? So you go to prison at 19, and then how long are you there that first stint?
The first one I did 2.5 years. So I got a sentence for, and they were all really drug related crimes. I'm not, um, you know, it wasn't anything crazy, possession of a weapon or auto theft or just stuff you do when you're, 18 and you're on drugs and you're trying to get some more drugs. It wasn't like anything crazy, but enough, you get enough of them and they're like, we've had enough of you. You need to go take a time
This
out.
is also before the 3-strike rule too, so that's
It is
probably
the
a
three
good thing.
strike. Yeah. So the poly class incident in California with Richard Allen Davis is what actually started the 3 strikes rule. And that was midway through some of my prison terms in California. And not to jump forward, but that's actually what started to shake me out of it. Was so many guys started getting 25 to life for these little crimes. And you really have to, you get a sense of like, wow, this gets really, really, really serious really fast. And when it gets serious, there's no undoing it. It gets serious.
Yeah, it's like fun for a moment until you get slapped. Like,
Yeah.
I can vibe with that. So you get out after 2.5 years, and then what kind of what happens? Like what's kind of like your flow here?
Well,
Obviously, you don't start a landscaping business from your lawn mowing career.
no, I didn't. So I got out and I wanted to be normal, and I didn't use any drugs, but I drank. And for a guy like me, there's a few things that fuel Lee, right? My most centered, authentic self is I'm very passionate. I'm very emotional. I'm a very loving person. I care deeply. So I'm very emotional based human being. I just am. I mean, you know me. I probably cry more than any woman that either one of us know. I can't, I can't not cry. I'm very passionate. And so that passion has been with me my whole life. And that's also not being able to control those feelings when
Right.
they're based in fear and anxiety and suffering and, just all the negative aspects of those feelings. I drank. So I didn't use drugs when that first time when I got out, but I would drink. And I ended up catching a DUI and getting a parole violation. And I got a year on that parole violation, and you do 50% in California. So I did 6 months. Then I got out, and this is a really interesting part of the story because I got out and I always wanted to do good when I got out. I always had intentions. I always had the best intentions. But the thing about intentions and actual practice, or you don't, when you're leaving a prison setting or even a jail setting, you don't know what life holds for you. You can, and if you're not aware of your own pitfalls or your own, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict,
Right.
and I didn't know how to control those behaviors. I didn't know how to control those obsessive compulsive behaviors. I didn't know that I was medicating my life trauma with alcohol and drugs, and they're not excuses. It's just what I was doing. I'm medicating, and so I would get out and make these bad choices and these bad mistakes and get corrected by getting sent back to prison and go, oh, I can't do that. But it takes a couple years. That's a serious timeout. So I get out on that violation. I meet my first daughter's mother, Claudia, which is a really cool part of the story because my first daughter's name is Alexis, and I was just reconnected with her. So I meet her, and I'm not doing drugs again. I'm like, I have to be able to drink normally. This has to be possible. Everybody else on earth can drink
Right.
and not do these things. So I test drove that, and I was a waiter at a restaurant, and I met Claudia, and we started dating. And I don't know that it's embarrassing just as much as it's just how bad of an alcoholic I am when I'm drinking. So we came home from work one night, and I had a truck, and I was blackout drunk, and she apparently went in the house And I got out of my truck and went a couple cars down and stole my neighbor's car for no reason. There was keys in it, and I just got in their car and just drove off in it. And I was so drunk that I hit a tree and a wall. And the police came, and that's a stolen vehicle, and I'm on parole. And so I got a 1.5 year prison sentence out of that one. So, I like
I'm sorry, it's not funny.
It is funny because that's the level of like, it's sad and it's funny, but that's my reality. The level of person that I am when I drink is that ridiculous. It's, there's just the body should stop moving, but it doesn't. And it just makes choices that are completely, ridiculous. So I was in San Quentin again. That's when you're in Northern California and you go to prison, you go to San Quentin. When you leave county, that's just where you go. And I was in West Block, which is San Quentin is just an amazingly awful prison. There's smaller cells than Alcatraz. There's 5 tiers inside of each block. There's West Block, East Block, North Block, South Block, death rows in San Quentin. It's very, very old, very archaic. Just the smell of it, the noise of it is it's crazy. So anyway, I'm in West Block, which is the reception center. So you basically go in there and you're in this 23-hour a day lockdown. You come out for breakfast and you come out for dinner. On the way out of chow, from breakfast, you get your lunch sack. And then they have yard days for the reception inmates a couple days a week, but you're on lockdown for 30 days. So you don't get phone, you don't get yard.
Right when you first get there,
Yeah, you get
lockdown.
nothing. You're in fish tank lockdown. And so my phone time came. And I was like, all right, I get to go call Claudia, and she was writing me letters and she was a good girl. She was a good woman. And I called her and we're talking for a few minutes. And one of the first things she says is that she's pregnant. So, it was, to me, it was like the best news to me because it represented like this hope. And I was like, man, because I loved her. I did. I really loved her. And it represented a lot of things to me. And it made me think maybe I can change. Like, oh, I want that. That'll cure me. Like that will stop me from doing these things that I do. And she came, and so again, that was a 16-month term and I ended up doing 9 months on it because you do half time in California. So I got, vehicle theft. And she came to visit me. I stayed they kept me housed in San Quentin. She came to visit me the whole time. What's amazing looking back on that is I hadn't changed too many of my behaviors.
Yeah.
I was in prison. I was still, guys would have, weed. You buy a stick. They call it a stick in there. It's just a really thin joint.
High stick or what?
Yeah. It's like the $10 and it's like 3 hits of weed, but and we're making pruno and, I'm just the same guy. I'm the same guy in there. And I'm thinking that somehow I'm going to get out and I'm going to be, different. And I did. This is how confused I was. And looking back on it, it wasn't that I didn't want to be a different guy. It's that I didn't even know how screwed up I was.
Right.
Everything that I did, every choice that I made was 100% cognitive. But on the back end of it, there was this complete lapse of true consequences and an understanding of addiction. And I'm a huge believer in, I just believe that the disease theory of alcoholism and drug addiction, because there's so many similarities between people who share the disease. So I didn't understand the disease of alcoholism or addiction. And I got out and I got a job back at that restaurant. And I think we're past I think it's been more than 7 years. So I did, there was an incident at so, listen, I got a management position at the restaurant and
Wow.
I started drinking.
After San Quentin,
after San Quentin, yeah. And I, but we would sit around and drink, same thing at the bar after. And Claudia and I got into an apartment and we had, the baby was there and I started drinking. And there was a pretty serious incident at the restaurant. There was a crime that occurred at the restaurant, and I was the main suspect. And I, wouldn't take a lie detector test, and they fired me. And from there, the drinking turned into drug use. And, my brother, who was alive at the time, has since died from heroin overdose. We started getting into some pretty serious crimes. And by this time, my criminal nature had increased. And I ended up getting convicted of an armed burglary in Alameda County. And I went back to prison. And this is the interesting part about this story. Claudia, to her testament, brought that baby to San Quentin, Alexis. And I remember I was behind glass because I was still in the reception center. And it was no joke time. And she set the baby up on the counter and she said, "This is the last time you're going to see this baby." And that was the last time I saw that baby. So
she came up there. So if I'm tracking this, so you're 23 when you get out the first time.
Yep.
And then you get in this uncontrollable kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
You do a little not small. I love when, I don't know, like Ray's over here, like, never even probably seen, the backside of a door. But, we talk about a small stint being 9 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember the first time
It's
I
a
did
little one.
2 weeks. I thought it was the end of the world, dude. So you do a little 9-month stint. Alexis comes around, her mother.
She was born when I was 25. Yeah.
You were 20. Yeah, that's okay. So I'm tracking. So she's born when you're 25. You do another 9-month deal for that lapse in memory, stealing a car, driving it into a wall.
Man.
I did that with my mother's car. My mother, I was 17 years old. My mom had never had a brand new car in her whole life. She immigrated here from Germany, was poor.
Mm-hmm.
They would eat like a potato for dinner. Her and her 2 sisters would shower.
Mm-hmm.
They would bathe in the same bucket. I think I'll never forget it. It was interesting. I was like looking at this the other day. I was like researching because I'm getting to the point where kids are becoming an option,
Mm-hmm.
and you start like researching just like children. Well, that's what I do. I don't know about anybody else,
Yeah.
but that's what I do. So the developmental stages of a human in the early life of like what years do you develop love and the mentality of love, and that's like 3 to 5, right? And then what years do you develop your sense of earning money, financial well-being, and that's like 7 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember cognitively my mom telling me she was driving this green Mustang, and she said, I just got to raise to $60,000 a year, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue. But there's always been a benchmark, and we'll talk about that obviously when we talk about development. But like $60,000 is a lot of money. My whole life, that's what I thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so my mom, again, similar situation. They go out and they buy a brand new Mustang off the showroom floor. I was 16, 17. She's like, "This is our car." A week after having it, I drove it into a wall.
Mm.
I mean, high on cocaine and drunk as anything, right? And so just, I can relate to just the complete lapse and just, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why. I mean, I didn't steal a car. I mean, realistically, it was my car, but I drove it into a wall. And I know the feeling of driving something into a wall. It wakes you up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You
It
wake.
does.
And
I
when
remember getting arrested.
Yeah, the cops.
sure.
When the cops get, because you contemplate leaving the car and then
Mhm.
reporting the car stolen. And this is what I do want to touch on it is having this adaptive mentality at a very young age can really, like, thinking on your feet. It's like it might be lying and cheating and stealing, but you're thinking on your feet.
100%.
You're problem solving in the moment. So I'm tracking all this stuff. So when you see Alexis for not the last time, but the last time at that time,
Last time for 21 years.
you were how old? 26, 25?
I was, well, so she was born when I was 25. And so I was probably 26. It's hard to, this is
I know.
so long ago, right? I'm
Yeah.
46. So it's been 20 something years. So, but I was right around there. And she, and I, for years I wrote her, and I think I did 3 on that prison term. And I went to Susanville and I wrote her for years and she would never write me back. And then it was heart-wrenching. I mean, it was, I'm in there
Alone.
and there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in all, you're just literally left with your thoughts. The worst thing about, prison is tough in the sense that, are you going to get tested as a man? Absolutely. But once that is there, brief periods of violence and action? Absolutely, especially in California prisons. There's some pretty serious stuff. The hardest thing about prison is yourself, is there's the complete absence of all other stimulus. other than, handball, pinochle, and working out. But other than that, you're reading and you're just left with yourself. And so for years I simmered on that, and it was very traumatic. And looking back, I have an immense amount of gratitude for Claudia for doing that. I was completely unfit to be a father. I was completely unfit to be in Alexis's life. And what Claudia did was incredibly brave and the most necessary thing at that point. And I absolutely did not deserve even a piece of mail back. So
Right.
she did the right thing. But
Yeah.
it was interesting because if we'll fast forward to the story, but Alexis is back in my life. So that was great. But I did that one, and I think we're taking the long route to get to how I changed. But from that prison sentence really started a change for me. That's when Three Strikes was in full force, and I had
So we're talking early 90s here.
yeah, yep, yeah, closer to late mid 90s, later 90s, yeah, like closer to the 2000s.
Okay.
I had so many homeboys on the yard, and that's what you call them, homeboys, but I had friends, just countless, and we're on a level 3 yard, so this isn't like Supermax. It's a pretty serious yard, but it's not Pelican Bay. And you're surrounded by guys. You live with guys. And I've had some amazing friends in prison. And it's weird to say, but you really become brothers because you're there with each other day in, day out. I mean, when you're on the yard, your homeboy walks to the toilet with you on the yard, so you can use the toilet, and his back is at your back, and he's facing out, so nobody can approach you from the back and get you while you're at the toilet. That level, it's when you're doing push-ups, he's standing watch. When you're doing pull-ups, he's standing watch. You're eating together, you same tables together, same commissary together, same tattoos together. It's like everything together for years, 24/7, 365. So you have some amazing friends. And and everybody's sober for the most part when there's no dope on the yard. But all of these guys that I'm really tight with, there are many of them that are doing 25 to life for burglary, theft, assault and battery, and it becomes very real and very scary when you realize how exactly the same you are as that human. And he's just had a few more opportunities to make a few more bad decisions than you made. So I started getting really cognitive on, like, this cannot be my reality. What is my problem? And I actually got rolled up a few times. I think I did 8 extra months on that term. I got a pretty severe assault and battery. I beat a dude up with a lock and a sock and got caught for it. And so I think I got 4 months for that. And then I got caught for Pruno, and I think I did 3 extra months for that. So in California prison system, they take away your good time when you do stuff wrong. So even in the behaviors, I was learning from even those behaviors. I'm like, man, I am the same guy. And I got an interstate compact to my family here in Las Vegas when I paroled finally. And I tried to not drink, and I tried to not do drugs. And that's where Alcoholics Anonymous started appearing to me. I think I went to one of my first meetings there, and I started to really realize, like, I have a drug and alcohol problem. Like, it's crazy that we hear this whole story, and I'm just now realizing that, but it's really difficult to sit. You want to hold on to that. I wanted to hold on to the fact that if you could do it normal, I could do it normal.
Yeah, of course.
And it just didn't work. And so, needless to say, I came here to Las Vegas and had some emotional situations happen with some of my family members. And I remember going out to a park and drinking a 40 ouncer, and it was downhill from there. And then pretty soon I was under arrest for burglary tools. And back then there was a detective program here in Las Vegas called ROPE, the Repeat Offenders Program.
Yeah.
So they released me from, what was his name? Sergeant Wes was his name. So they released me from county jail as a parolee, unbeknownst to me. And I started doing drugs, of course, right away. And I started noticing people were following me. And I was like, no, this isn't like drug delusion. There's like literally people following me. And so what the Repeat Offenders Program does is they let you go out and commit small crimes where there's no humans involved, and they'll let you do 4 or 5 of them. And so in Nevada, they have what they call the small bitch and the big bitch. So that's the small habitual criminal act and the big habitual criminal act. And so what they're trying to do with a repeat offender is catch him on enough crimes and give him the big habitual. So that's a 15 to life term. So what they do is they film you literally. They have detective squads. And so I realized I knew that it wasn't like, oh, this is just one of those kind of like imagining stuff. There was like physically human beings following me around. So I stopped doing stuff, and then they just eventually pulled me over. And it was the craziest arrest. I was stopped by Metro, and then directly behind him was 2 undercover cars, and it was Detective West, and he's handcuffing me, and he's Lee Barber, birth date, social security number. We've been following you, and then after I get the entire police reports for what they had been doing, it's insane. Like, I was very lucky. So I went to county jail, and it was burglary tools that I had been arrested for. I wasn't in the commission of a crime, meaning that there was like a crowbar and some masks and some gloves in the back of my car,
Just
which
the
is like
usual Sunday driving
yeah,
tools.
So like, as far as like, oh, can they take that to trial? No, it's a misdemeanor charge, but I'm on interstate compact. So I remember going in front of the judge a couple times, and I wanted to change.
Mosley.
No, mine was Judge Hardcastle, but Mosley's no joke. So, and I remember going in and pleading my case and telling her, like, listen, you can send me to prison, and I do fine in prison, but I'm not changing. It's not like, I want to go to I want to fix this thing. And so she sent me to a drug treatment program, and that really was the beginning. And I got caught smoking cigarettes and kicked out, and I ran away to Hawaii. And we'll just kind of shorten this up a little bit. I went to Hawaii to live with my brother, who was a heroin addict.
The best.
And that was a nightmare. It's way better going to Hawaii when you're not on drugs and you have a lot of money. It's a totally different experience. So I ran away from the drug program and my charges in Nevada. And I went out there. And of course, eventually I got caught trying to steal a car. And they gave me 2.5 to 5 years in Hawaii. And so I went to Halawa State Prison on Oahu, and then Oahu shipped me to Tallahatchie County Correctional Facility on stateside, because they rent prisons on the mainland because Halawa's only so big they can't house all of the inmates. So it was completely sectioned off for Hawaiian inmates. And, I had some really interesting God shots here. The difference between a Hawaiian prison and American prison, or not an American prison, Hawaii's America. I didn't mean it.
Mainland. I get what you're saying.
Mainland, yeah. Is that there's no politics. I mean, there's the Usos and the Hawaiians, and as long as you don't mess with the Usos, you're pretty cool, right? These are just huge human beings. There's no reason to mess with those.
Usos are Hawaiian Crips.
Well,
Pacific Islander Crips.
They're Pacific Islander Crips, but they're from Samoa, and they're just enormous human beings.
Yeah,
they don't work out. They're just massive humans.
Yeah.
Great people, love them. But but other than that, there's no tension. There's no racial politics. There's no people aren't running around stabbing each other. They're not getting in huge race riots on the yard, and you can trade soups with people outside of your own. It's just different.
Yeah.
So it was a great time for me to decompress, to stop all of it. And I had a couple incidences in there that really changed my life. One of them was I got my GED, and then I got my high school diploma. And so, this is where it starts for me. So I'm in a drug treatment program called Strategies for Change. It's one pod. So a pod has, 50 or 55 cells in it. And it's just, it has a main dorm area, not a dorm, like tables and TVs and stuff. Everybody's seen this on TV. But everybody in this pod is in Strategies for Change. And it's a 10-month intensive drug program. Like, you're getting every day. It was like there was something to do every day. So I'm in this, and I'm going to anger management classes, and I got my GED, and then I continued my educational process and actually got a full high school diploma. And I remember sitting at this table. This is one of the most important moments in my life. And I was sitting at this table, and I was in front of my cell, because you would come out of your cell with your coffee and sit down at this little metal table. And that's, everybody had their spot, and that was my spot. And I don't know what precluded it, but it came to me that I was, a 27-year-old or 28-year-old, I think at that time, junkie, criminal. And my family had to send me packages so I could have stuff. And I mopped showers, and that's who I was. I wasn't this person that it was just this complete collapse of this false identity and this false ego that I had. And I had built all those things up. It's interesting. I just thought of it. You see these people with like alter egos where they have this massive trauma in their life. And then you see them on, the movies and stuff where they're like, there's two human beings in there. It's almost like that, but there wasn't two human beings. I was just this one human being with this completely sheltered false ego, false perception of reality, who had to talk myself into being something or thinking I was something that I wasn't, so I could live with my life circumstances. So I could live with being in prison. So I could live with, listen, I was a loser, right? I was a junkie. I stole stuff from people. I was the exact opposite of the kind of human being that I am today, or the people that I admire.
Right.
It was nothing, but it came to me in that moment. And from that moment, those two things collided. My successes with the GEDs and the anger management classes and being in that drug program, and then the complete recession and relapse of those false walls. And at that moment, literally that moment, I was able to start building a new person. And it's funny. I have this little briefcase full of this stuff that I had in strategies for change. And I was writing like Molly made, like trying to figure out, like I literally have these journals of like how to start a Molly made business. Like I started like, what do I do when I get out of here? Like janitorial businesses. Yeah. Cause you would see these things in these magazines that we would get, and it was like, I was trying to find this, I was trying to get into this positive creation and create myself a plan. But what the main thing that changed was that I started believing that I could do something other than being who I was. And that was a huge, huge moment in my life. And from that moment, I think I changed from a fixed mindset into the beginning forms of birthing into an abundance mindset and believing in myself. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really powerful. So, and I just don't want to lose track here. So all this is happening when you're in Tallahassee. Everything you were just kind of touching on, like the GED, like and I wrote a couple things down here that I thought were important to me. Just like GED and high school diploma, and then obviously journaling about creating these businesses. So at this point, you're like late 20s. You get out. How many more times are you in and out of prison? And then when do you get into? Because I know future casting here, but I know that you get into presidential limousines and all that stuff. So how many between that moment that you were just talking about, you get out of prison, then do you get to, let's just say, normal life?
That was it. So I still had the charges in Nevada that I had run from. And so I served 2.5 years in Hawaii prison system, which was on the mainland. And I can't remember the name of the form, but there's a form that says if you have charges in another state, they either have to come pick you up or run them conservative or concurrent or drop them. So I filed that form. The Hawaii Parole Board released me, and then Nevada came pick me up. So two detectives from Nevada Police Department came pick me up, put me in handcuffs, put me on it was almost movie like. So I'm in normal airports. I'm in full prison garb.
Cuffed.
I'm cuffed up. It wasn't so the interesting thing from Hawaii to Tallahassee was a prison plane, and it was the worst. It was so bad. It was almost it was literally a prison plane. It was almost 20 hours. We were on the ground we had to make 3 stops. I think we were in the ground sometimes for 4 or 5 hours, shackled to another man. It was terrible. But from there to Nevada, I was literally like on Southwest. And so we're in the back of the plane. I remember being wheeled through McCarran because what they do is they put you in a wheelchair because you're shackled hands and feet, and you're taking these little baby steps. And it was insane. And I just remember like, I never want to do this again. And it was so embarrassing because it wasn't like, I didn't feel cool anymore. I didn't feel tough anymore. I didn't feel like, that's, I think when you're doing those types of things, you want to make yourself feel like you're a big bad gangster or you're a tough guy. And really you're just not. Listen, the reality is I failed for my daughter. I failed for Claudia. I failed my family. I wasn't tough. Tough is doing the right thing. Tough is doing the hard thing. Tough is doing the work. That's tough. And when I was in that airport, I remember just being so embarrassed. And it was because I wasn't that guy anymore. I was humiliated. I was like, man, this sucks. And people were looking at me, and I just remember, and I went to the fish tank in High Desert, and High Desert's awful, man. And High Desert sent me to Southern Desert, and Southern Desert sent me to Casa Grande, which is a work release program. And I was there for about 4 months. I did 3.5 years on my last term. And I was there in
That was after Tallahatchie was another 3.5 years.
No, the total of those 2 terms together.
Between Hawaii, Tallahassee, and
I did. Yep, I did.
Nevada.
Yep, I did. A little over 2.5 years in Hawaii, and then I had about a year remaining in Vegas.
And then how old were you when you got out? Because I do want to touch on Casa Grande. Just
I think it was
because
31.
It's cool, 31.
Yep.
Casa Grande is just interesting. I don't know. Maybe we've lost a couple people on this road, but I don't think we have. But Casa Grande is really interesting to me because you're in prison, but you're like living in a facility. It's almost like a house, right? I mean,
it's like a
comparatively
apartment building with lots of guys in one room.
right. But you can leave, you can go to work.
Yep.
Like you're able to just go do whatever you want. Not really, but like you can leave because they're like you're on good time and you're tracking out and stuff like that, right? Which is probably like a weird experience, like what you're talking about as like an adult, because you're going out and work. I don't know if you worked then, but you're going out and you're working a normal life, and then you're coming around normal everyday people, and then you're literally going back to prison, which is to me is just that's surreal. Like everything else is, you're in San Quentin, it's normalized, right? You're in whatever.
You're all the way in.
Yeah. You're in Casa Grande. You're like
half in, half out. So for me, it was amazing because I was done. I was done. It's interesting because when I was in High Desert and Southern Desert here, I did not fit in anymore. So, who I am in prison is I carry myself okay, but I just wasn't, I didn't fit in anymore. In prison, there's like racist guys, and I'm not a racist guy. I don't like any of that stuff. But there's the skinhead kind of group who I never hung around with, and then there's just the regular kind of white boys. But they hang around each other. I did not fit in with them anymore because my mentality had changed. So by the time I got to Casa Grande, it was like, man, I was starting to fit in because I fit in better with the people. So I did work. I got a job in about 2 weeks at a car wash on Serene and Eastern. And so this is, listen, I talk about hard things. I took a bus for almost an hour and a half to 2 hours every day in each direction from Casa Grande down to this car wash. And this is where literally I can look back and track my successes was to this car wash. Guys were, because the guys who go through the car wash, they give you tips. So you get to keep the tips. Now, Casa Grande doesn't get to know but I'm far away from that now. But yeah, we get tips, right? So we're getting tips, and I would stash them in my locker, and other guys are spending their tips on the slot machines. They're having guys come and send them weed. They're doing all this stuff. They're, all kinds of, I saved my tips.
You were over it.
I was over it. So I remember going and like sweeping up, like, in the parking lot. I'm like, maybe if Tim sees me sweeping this parking lot, he'll let me not be the towel bitch anymore. So the towel bitch. So what happens is the car wash is down there. I drive by it. I'm like, it's still
there.
Oh yeah. So what happens is you go and you get this like $20 car wash. And when you come out, it's really dope because it's what everybody wants. There's a towel bitch on the outside of the car wash because you got to wipe it down.
Always.
So that was me. Now the towel bitch in Las Vegas is like under direct sunlight. It's not
the whole
time.
Day.
So behind me is this whole line of guys, and they're inside the cars under a tent. And I'm like, man, that's where I want to be. I want to be under that tent. And I was sweeping up the little thing, and I remember going into the office and saying, Tim, like, if I can ever get a spot under that tent, man, I want to be there. I'll work hard. And so eventually I got under the tent. And so now I was out of the sun. And then these were my aspirations at this point in my life. And I remember then I started really realizing the really cool job was the guy in the back with the hose, with the pressure washer, because he had a little room that he would get to sit in that was air conditioned when there was no cars. So not only were you in the shade, but you also had a little room with some air conditioner. I eventually got that, and I saved my money. And when I got out, my sister, so in 2007, I got out of prison for the final time. And I had a box of mail. I had 2 pairs of jeans and a t-shirt. that was the complete everything that I owned. And I think I had $1,800 in tips. And the first thing I did was I went and bought myself a car. So I saved all my money and set myself up for success through the determination to go from the towel bitch to the detailer to the hose guy.
I mean, that's big. I mean, I think it's massive to even have aspirations after, you're in and out of prison for 12 or 13 years. Like you've never really seen anybody, I don't know, man, like, just chase any kind of dream really. And you had some wherewithal, I think that everyone comes to their point in time, like you talked about. I mean, there's seconds and inches. I think in this type of lifestyle, you're either there's the door. I think the universe opens a couple of doors, and they say, "Listen, man, everyone deserves a second." That's just what I believe. You deserve a second chance.
Me too.
You're either gonna take the door or you're not, right? And if you don't, then you're ending up in prison. So you for the rest of your life. So you dodge a couple bullets there,
some serious bullets.
And your early 30s getting out of prison and you're like, I'm not gonna quit. There's a mental fortitude there. So at that point, when do you start working for, what happens after that, and when do you go to presidential? Because I know presidential was a big move for you.
Huge move for me. So almost right away. So I was at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It was like a rowdy kind of group. I can't remember what they called it. Like, it was just a rowdy group. It was down by Boulder Highway.
Yeah.
And there was this dude named Kenny, and we call him One-Eyed Kenny because he got shot in the head. And so one of his eyes is like crooked,
Sick.
And he's just like this, like rough, and he's in this meeting and he's like, I'm driving this limo to California and these guys are snorting coke and I'm not snorting coke. And I'm like, I just remember hearing his story and I'm looking at this dude and he's like tatted. He's been in prison. So he's got neck tattoos and, he's like, and I just remember thinking, if this dude can drive a limousine, I can drive a limousine. That was my thought. And so I've known Kenny throughout the program for a time. He never prays. So I go to pray because it's what you do at the end of AA. And Kenny beelines for the door. And I'm like, oh no, I'm ghost. I take off after Kenny. And I'm like, hey, homeboy, come here. So I ask him, I say, hey, what's the deal with this limousine? I'm out of Casa Grande. I'm washing cars right now. And I had gotten out of Casa Grande, but I was still at the car wash because I didn't want to not have a job. And he's like, come meet my boy, Jeff Iverson, tomorrow at West Care out inpatient AA meeting. And I was like, I'm there. And so, I had a call. But what's crazy is the things I had done to get to that point. I had set myself up for success. I was sober and I had a car and I had a driver's license. I'd done everything right. Everything right. The great thing about getting out of prison at that time was I didn't have, my driving record was clean. So I just had to go down and take a test, right? So I go down to meet Jeff and he asked me how long I'd been out of prison, and the laws for the Nevada Department of Transportation were different at that time. And if I was clean and if I had a car to get back and forth from work, and I said yes. And he said, come down tomorrow and we'll get you started. And I went, did my background checks and filled out all my paperwork, and I started. And so I was a driver at Presidential for just over a year. And I had gotten this wedding account. Listen, it's funny because this is, I think, the key for people. It was for me. Abundance mindset. A person with an abundance mindset, in my opinion, doesn't wait for an opportunity. They make an opportunity. And I can look back from the car wash. I made myself get hired as the detail guy. I made myself get hired as the hose guy. I made myself save that money. All the things that I did put me in a situation because I was creating opportunity. I wasn't waiting for it to come. I didn't have any excuses on why I couldn't do it. I just did it. And so I was at Prez for about a year, Presidential Limousine for about a year, and I got this wedding account, and it was fairly big for me. And I started getting so many reservations from this wedding account that I was assigning them to other drivers. So I had an account that I was assigning to other drivers because I couldn't do all the rides.
Yeah.
And that was doing like $5,000 or $10,000 in transportation a month. And now I'm really like in this wedding game. I'm like, man, there's money in this wedding game in Vegas and the transportation. So in the meantime, I had written the owner of the limousine company, JJ, amazing human being, lots of gratitude to JJ. I wrote him this letter. I wanted to be, what did I want to be? First, I wanted to be a safety inspector, right? Because I was like, I don't want to drive. There's no future in this. I want to be a company man. So I got turned down for that. Like I wrote him a letter. He pulled that letter out years later. He had that letter, and then I'm like, no, he won't let me be the safety guy. And so by the time I get to this wedding thing, I'm like, there's money. There's no account executive at Presidential. So Presidential Limousine Bell Transportation is the largest, currently still the largest transportation company in the state of Nevada. It's owned by the Bell family, amazing family, huge company. This isn't like one or two limos. This is the largest limousine and transportation company in Nevada. It's huge. So, but there's nobody doing outside sales ever. Nobody in the history of the company did their job was just outside sales. So I get the idea that I'm just going to go set up wedding accounts because at this time I'm just thinking like, how do I get as many rides as I can as a driver? So I literally took a week off, and put a suit and tie on and spent the entire week going up and down the strip to wedding chapels. And I signed up white wedding chapel, flowers. I got like 4 or 5 wedding chapels, and I was doing those jobs, and my transportation accounts were doing like $20,000 a month in transportation. And I'm in Jeff Iverson's ear the whole time to get me to talk to JJ. And then JJ finally says, yes, you can come and do inside sales. I'm going to pay you $12 an hour and 1.5% commission on all of your transportation. And you still have to drive at night. So I would come in and work in the office all day long. And I was driving around a concierge desk and trying to sell transportation. It's a big game in Nevada, right? There's no low-lying fruit in transportation, Nevada. Anybody that's been here knows that. And then I would bring my tuxedo and I would go out and drive at night. And let me just tell you, from the moment that I started driving, I was working. I mean, I would go do night shifts and work till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And I would go home and sleep for 2 or 3 hours. And then I would take airport rides in the morning. So I would come in and pick up back then it was a Navigator before Escalades were big. And I would go do my first airport ride at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And then I would get in the back of the Navigator and sleep for an hour or two until my next ride. And I remember just having knots of money, my tips, like a couple grand, right? And I remember buying a new car and like having, all this, like doing stuff like legally, but it was just, that was my hustle. Like I took all my game and my hustle and applied it to that. So when I got into the inside sales gig, I just did the same thing. I just worked. I'm just a worker. Like I just work. Cause that's just like, when in my past life, being an addict or an alcoholic is a 24/7 job. There's no
Full-time commitment.
It's full-time commitment, and you're willing to go to any lengths necessary. I mean, I've walked, 15 miles in the heat.
Yep.
So this was just normal to me. And my accounts got so big. I remember like, I can't get paid $12 an hour and get 1.5% commission on my sales and still drive. It's not. So I went up and renegotiated my commitment with JJ. And by that time, my accounts were doing anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 a month in transportation. He gave me a 2.5% commission rate, kept me at $12 an hour. But that's what I loved as a salesman. That was my first gig in real sales. I'm like, yeah, pay me. Hourly's nothing, man. Give me more of my commission. Let me out earn. Let my hustle be my earning capacity. I can leverage, we listen to Tyler Williams on the podcast, and I think he's the one that says, what you have to realize you have as a human being to leverage is you. You have your energy, you have your will, you have your drive, you have your commitment, you have your grind, you have your grit, you have your tenacity. And if you just leverage that and go hard, it's worth a lot of money. So that's what I had to leverage, and that's what I got paid for. So I sold limousines at Prez for about 8.5 years. So I was in the office. I was 8.5 years, completely out of cars. I think my best month in transportation was CES, and I sold like $320,000 in 1 month in transportation. So that was my best month in transportation. I drove a company car. I drove a Cadillac Escalade. I got free gas. From where I had come from, my final year at Prez, and it's weird because I had this like little laundry hustle. I go into that, but I had side hustles. But my final year in Prez, I made, around $110,000 was my total income from everything. And for me, I remember when I made $40,000 as a driver that first year, and I was like, holy shit, like this is like, I freaking made it. I got an apartment and I got like a nice used car. Like to me, it was like
Beats Casa Grande.
beats Casa Grande. And going into the years in the limousine industry, what I learned from that was I learned a lot of professionalism. I learned how to write an email. I learned how to respond in business. I learned how to negotiate in a more sophisticated environment. So, my job was account creation. So, I had some really great accounts. Exotics Racing here in Las Vegas was doing about $50,000 a month in transportation with me. I had developed that relationship from the very beginning. I had a lot of concierge desks that would do transportation. So anybody that would use multiple forms of transportation reoccurring throughout the month, those were my accounts. And so, we have accounts that are doing 10, 15, 20, $25,000 in transportation a month. Then I had the conventions that would come in. I dealt with a lot of the destination management companies in Las Vegas. It was a full-time job, and it was all sales. It was a longer sales. It was a relationship development, but it was 100% hustle. There was there was nobody at the job to teach me the job. I made the job. So all of the relationships that I built, and I'm not saying I did it by myself. I did it with a lot of help from Iverson and Bell. Through their support and belief in me. But when it came to the field, it was 100% my hustle. It was 100%. So, looking back on that, Iverson always believed in me, and JJ developed a belief in me. I think that over the time, we gained a great respect, and I just a huge debt of gratitude to JJ. Yeah.
So you start selling like a madman here. And I love that, like, that big, I always call it the corporate golden cuffs, because they just love to just dangle that carrot, because there's some security there, right? You got a car, you got free gas, here's your $12 an hour. I don't care. Give me more commish, 2.5% commish. And you're out. Without you, whatever. Maybe they would have done it. Who knows, right?
They weren't doing too bad. I was a branch
of
a
course
massive
not. No,
sales
of course
organization.
they weren't doing too bad. But what I'm just saying is, like, this outsourcing of new sales, right?
Yeah.
And so
They were online. They did really good with their sales department online. So the click through, because it's transportation. So transportation, the tourism industry in Vegas is like a moving escalator, right? They get on the escalator from their
Right.
city, right?
yeah,
And then if you don't catch them on the way down the escalator, they're gone. It's out. It's a tourist, right? So you're trying to capture the tourism dollar, and that's not always. It's caught in two places: before they get here and while they get here, and when they leave, it's gone. So it's just it's a constant moving piece. But they had a pretty good online, not pretty good. They had a good online presence. They sold a lot of transportation online, but I was the only one out in the field.
So 8.5 years, you're like late 30s at this time.
Yep.
By the tail end of presidential, and so you get to late 30s, and when do you why did you start knocking doors? And I know that by this time, this is 7 years ago, 6 years ago, and Uber comes into play, and you might have seen the writing on the wall. And why'd you get into doors?
Well, I didn't see the writing on the wall. Uber slapped me in the face with it. So Uber was in an immediate market infringement, immediate and drastic. So I was making 110 grand, but a huge, massive portion of that was from sales commission. So I was a key component in getting the MGM contract set up for Presidential and Bell, which meant that we had the concierge desk. So we had the New York door, but we had concierge desks. So if you're in that group, you get to be a vendor for the concierge desk. That means anybody in the hotel that's booking transportation can book your car through the concierge desk.
That's good shit.
The moment that Uber and Lyft came in, the MGM account was doing 10, 15 grand a month. The Caesar, same. All of them went down to almost nothing instantly. It was an instant market infringement there was no way possible to capture the landslide, because it's not like there's no lack of limousines or buses or party buses or transportation in Vegas. So it's like
Right.
everybody's vying for the same accounts.
Right.
And when Uber and Lyft comes in with a 30% market infringement, you're like, holy crap, I just lost like 30 grand a year, like right now. So a little bit before, well, Uber and Lyft took about a year and a half to come in. The first time they didn't do good. And then the second time, you really start to get an idea of politics and a lobbying dollar. You really firsthand, you get to see it.
Well, wasn't there like an instance where like a couple of Department of Transportation people rolled up on a couple Uber drivers with a mask on and some automatic weapons and served them like a $10,000 fine, and Uber was just like, "We'll pay the fine, keep driving."
I don't know. There might have been. I know that there was.
Do you
some
know anything about that?
I
No, I'm
heard.
just
I heard
kidding.
some stories. There was some interesting instances. So in the meantime of that happening, or during its happening, I had a buddy, Justin Mott, amazing salesman, one of the best. Justin Mott's a goat on doors and in homes. Great, amazing salesman. So, and he just has this personality, and he's coming around, and we go to, we have some social circles that are similar. And I see Justin in some of these social circles, and, I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Uber and Lyft's not here yet. And he's waving around these, these $3,000 or $4,000 checks, $5,000. He's like, this is every week, bro. This is every week. You got to come check this out. This is Vivint. And I'm like, that's a multi-level marketing, bro. I'm not going to come to that. I got a Cadillac Escalade for free. I pull up to Beltran, bro. Listen, Beltran's big operation. There's gas. They have their own gas pumps. Like I pull up in my Cadillac Escalade. I fill my gas tank up twice a week for free. I got a free phone. I got health insurance. I'm making 110 grand a year. Like, from where I was from, I felt like
A millionaire.
I had an immense amount of gratitude for my life. And this dude's running around with this little $5,000 check, which is a handsome check. Even to me at that time, because if you're making 5 racks a week, that's 20 racks a month. This is a good year. I didn't believe it, and I'm like, no, I'm stable over here, bro. I don't want to, whatever your multi-level marketing thing is. There's no other way you're getting these checks. So now Uber and Lyft. And then, I think it was Casey that said, life-changing has in a sense, and I'm going to butcher what he said, but life-changing has an interesting way of changing your perspective, right? On how open you are to a new idea of something happening. And so when Uber and Lyft happened, instantly, I mean, within, 30 days, I'm like, holy shit. Like it literally was a financial landslide. And yeah. And I'm like, what do I do? And so I called Mott, and I'm like, Mott, what's up? What is this thing that you're doing? He's like, well, we knock doors, and I get these dots, and I go to dots, and I knock on the door, and I sell them security. And I'm like, and you get paid that much money? He's like, yeah, bro, I'm getting like 3 to 5 grand a week. And I'm like, well, can I do it part-time? And he's like, I don't know. I'm going to hook you up with John. And I'm fairly skeptical. And so, John Taylor, intro John Taylor. I go to meet Justin Mott and John Taylor at Joe's Crab in Joe's Stone Crab, the infamous recruiting grounds for all door-to-door guys, plus really, really good steak and lobster. And I still remember the table. And this is where, my life changed, and a huge, huge shout out of gratitude. It's I have some human beings in my life that have literally changed the entire course of my life. Jeff Iverson being one, JJ Bell being another, Justin Mott introducing me to John Taylor, completely changed the course of my life. And so, my pitch was, listen, let me come in here and do this thing part-time, right? Because what I need to do is I just need to make up this 30 grand that I just lost, because I can't not make over 100, because I have an over 100 lifestyle now. I need to just make up this. And this is where the journey for my understanding of not only recruiting, but abundance mindset, what wall do we put our ladder against, started. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that I was being sold by John, but he sold the shit out of me. But I remember really clearly him qualifying me, because this is what we do, right? We qualify when we sell correctly. We qualify whoever we're at with the sales cycle. And he asked me about my family. And he said, "So where are you spending your time?" And I said, "I'm at Pres, and I'm there about 8 hours a day." And he says, "Well, what's going on with your daughter?" And I said, "I go home and I spend some time with my daughter," right? Like, he says, "So what you're telling me is right now you were making 100 grand a year, 110. Now you're making, 70, 80 grand a year, and you want to go and work there. So if you continue working there for 8 hours a day, are you still going to have that 30% market? Are you still going to have that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's so what you're telling me is that you want to go work there for less money and the same time, and then you want to take the rest of the time that you have for yourself and your family, and you want to come put that in with me for 5 days a week and work part-time so you can make up the 100 and the 30 grand. Like, is that what you want to do with your life? And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I feel safe with that." And, that's really where it keyed in. And his pitch was the real pitch. It's the pitch. It's listen, this is the thing in life. We are putting time and effort into something, whether you're a barista at Starbucks, whether you work at a car rental agency, whether you're a photographer, whether you're an IT guy, whether you're in sales, you're putting your time and effort into that. And that's your life. This isn't a practice round. There's no seconds on this thing. And what it really keyed me into and what sold me was, where do I want to spend the time? Because if I'm going to put my energy, my spirit, my grind, my hustle, the one thing that I have in this world that nobody can take away from me, that I have infinite power to leverage, is myself. And I'm going to leverage that into something that's not financially beneficial, to something that I don't love, that's not spiritually fulfilling, right? Because it's not. Even I enjoyed my time at Pres, but working 2 jobs. So we have this lunch, and by the time, I heard Justin talking and I heard John talking, and I literally was like, if you can do it, I can for sure do it. Like, and I went home, and I was with Misty at that time, and she had just moved in with me, and I had, Lotus, and she was 3, and I had a mortgage. And I realized that if I took that job, that I have to give that Cadillac Escalade back, and I have to get a car. So I'm going to increase. Not only am I not going to have my 70,000 or 80,000, I'm going to have more bills. And this guy's talking to me about, like, yeah. And I asked him, what happens if I don't sell any alarms? He's like, then you don't get paid any money. And I'm okay. All right. But I feel like I can do it. And he's like, if you feel like you can do it, you can do it. And I went home and I talked to Misty, and she says, do you really believe you can do it? And she had, she just literally just moved in with me. And, when you're looking at your 3-year-old daughter, and you're more, listen, there was nobody else. It was me. I was holding that together,
Yeah.
especially for her. And I thought about, I'm like, well, what happens if I fail? I'm going to, the worst case is I have to, I don't know, maybe go be a driver. JJ's not going to give me my job back. I don't know. It's like, you can't fail. Like, and I had pictures of me in like moving out of my house and going into an apartment. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. Period. It's not going to happen. And I just developed this conviction in that one night that I could absolutely do this job, and that there was no way possible on God's earth that I was going to fail, because I couldn't. And that's where, my internal mechanism is, in everything that I approach currently, started at that moment. I cannot fail. That is my true, honest, most deep belief in myself, is that I do not have the capacity to fail, because I will die trying. I will not fail my daughter. I will not fail myself. I will not fail my life. I will not regress. I will not. It just will not happen. And it started there, where I just believed that I had to. And I committed, and I went, and I remember, going and giving Jeff my 2 weeks. And he's like, what are you going to go do? I said, I'm going to go knock doors with Mott. He's like, you can do it. And I remember going and talking to JJ. And I've told people this story, JJ is a big, boisterous, bearded, we call him Big Dog. Just a big, loud, bullish man, just a manly dude, man. You just love the guy. Like he's just, a country boy. Like, and I just remember him slapping his desk and laughing at me. You're going to go knock doors. Oh my God. Like, and I was embarrassed. Like, man, am I making the right decision? And he got over it. And listen, I don't want people to think that's JJ's ultimate person. I think in the beginning is like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, are you serious? You're going to go sell alarms door to door? It initially sounded funny. After that settled, JJ supported me. And he, we had some conversations and he told me, I believe in you. And I know what you've done here and you'll be successful. But that initial moment never left me, and I was embarrassed and I was like, am I making the right decision? But I fell back into that conviction that, and I saw the opportunity. And I think this is the difference. And we really get into what we talk about on the podcast. A few things, I want to back some things up. First of all, I loved Seth's story and Casey and Kenny, all these guys. But doors are the great definer.
Yeah.
You've heard me say this. Listen, doors do not care if you're white, if you're black, if you're Asian, if you're Spanish, if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're 20, if you're 50. They do not care. Doors will eat you up if you let them. So Casey did say it on his podcast. You are the equivalent of your life's experiences on that door. If you don't have, and I don't want to just say a soldier mentality, but if you don't have a belief in yourself that you can't be beaten down, the doors will beat you down. And in that moment, in those few days when I was committing to Vivint, I had that belief that I would do that job. And I quit and I went to a couple lunches with JT and Jeremy and all those guys back in the old school Vivint office. Some great salesmen back then, that had pioneered a lot of the early programs for the general management year-round programs in Vivint. And, I quit Prez. I got a car and I went out with Pat Mendez, who we've had on the show, Buff Pat, an amazing human being. Pat is just a ruthless killer on doors. Absolutely. And when I say that, I mean of the utmost integrity, but just a Jedi in sales experience. Pat's an amazing human being. And I remember, I was scared. And I'm a huge believer in, I have to live my life with my fear behind me. And that fear pushes me forward. I think a lot of people put their fear in front of them and it holds them back. With an abundance mindset, the only thing I've come to the determination, the only thing in life, if you want to listen, everybody's heard my story. If I want to pull out some excuses, I got a book. I got a book of excuse why I can't. And, oh, geez. And my mom and the drugs and, the prison and the convictions and I don't think about any of them. I never have. I've always kept my eyes on the road ahead and created a path for myself with abundance. I think that, people get that fear and it holds them back. I was out with Pat Mendez and I was fucking petrified, man. I was like, what is this? And Pat just got this little new Audi A4. And I'm like, okay, this dude's successful. And Taylor's rolling around in a BMW, and we go out and he's like, you can do this. And I'm like, all right. And he got Street Genie, the little app. And we roll me and you rolled through that neighborhood. I said, this is the Pat Mendez neighborhood.
So much meat on that bone.
It's a lot.
6 years later.
Yeah. And he's, he's hunting dots. He's a takeover guy. And I'm like, what are you doing? And now he's probably a much better trainer, but Pat back then was just like an assassin. He's like, you're going to learn or you're going to die. So he's just hitting these dots and categorizing stuff. And I remember going up to doors and I'm like, how are we talking to them? How did we just get in this house? Why is this guy signing this piece of paper right now? Like it was so confusing. Like there's so much information and people really, they underestimate doors and they underestimate the complexity of doors and the professionalism. They think you're just a door knocker. At the level of door knockers that we are, once you become a veteran door knocker or a professional door knocker, there are some serious it's maneuvering and verbal chess, and it's I'm just reading the game theory, and it's really it's just amazing what happens on a door and what you have to learn. And so I just remember thinking like, holy crap. And so also, if we back up a little bit, I told John when he recruited me, who's the best in the office? He said Pat Mendez and Jeremy Moriello. And Jeremy Moriello was had Justin Mott. And I said, well, I want to knock with Pat. And he says, then you'll be on Pat team. And I said, I want to be on Pat team because he sounds like he's the best. And I just went out, and I remember we knocked a door, and it was our first day. And all I remember Pat doing on that first day was like, hi, I'm Pat. Can I come in? That's all that. It was way more than that. But listen, it's like stage fright. There's so much going on. All I heard was, hi, I'm Pat. I'm the alarm manager. Can I come in and sell your face? That was like, and so the first door he let me knock, we were like halfway through the day. I said, hi, I'm Lee with Vivint. We want to take a look at your alarm. Do you mind if I come in? And the guy's like, no, absolutely not. I still remember the house. And I remember getting back in the car with Pat, and Pat going, that's what we can't teach people. The bravery to ask to go in, just to go in. You just got to go in. And I remembered that. And I trained with Pat on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I went out on my own Saturday. I'm pretty sure I got an alarm my first day. I sold 7 alarms my first week.
7
alarms my first week. Yeah. It was just the alarm manager.
After the 3 days with Pat,
Yeah.
you sold 7 in a row.
Yeah, I've never been back in a car with anybody ever training again. I did a ride along with Doug Cartwright once just because he was in town.
And you've knocked a couple doors with Kenny later in life.
Oh, but that was just paired up.
Yeah, but that was just late.
Oh, God. And you know what's awful about that, bro? Kenny's such a hero of mine. I went out knocking with him the first day, and I was trash, bro. I was so nervous. It was like, I don't want to call Kenny a hero, but he's a man that I look up to in life. And he's just such a great door knocker. And I went out and knocked a couple, and I was so nervous. And I'm not a rookie, but my stage fright, and I wanted to impress him. And I just remember being trash on like 2 doors, and he's like, and I'm like, he's like, you got to get your whistle wet. And I'm like, bro, I'm not usually like this, but yeah. Pat was the first guy.
3 days with Pat.
3 days with Pat. And then I went out and sold. And so I started in September 28th or 9th in 2016 with Vivint. And Vivint's fiscal year begins October 1. So that's the reset. So my first year with Vivint was October 1. 2017, I was the national rookie of the year for the entire Vivint sales organization. I had 213 families protected. So out of all of the other rookies that were hired in the United States that year, I was top rookie, which is a pretty crowning achievement for me. I'm very proud of it.
So any award from Vivint, in my opinion, and I don't give a shit what anybody says, because I know we got some people that hate on the Vivint world, but I think any award from Vivint's probably a prestigious award, right? Not probably, it is a prestigious award.
Well, they don't give listen, it's the old first prize is a Cadillac Escalade, second prize is steak knife, third prize is you're fucking fired, right? There's in the sales industry, if you get an award, it's because you did something. You're not getting, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So let me just back up a little bit, because I know something that our listeners don't know is the first time you asked to go in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that again?
What?
When you're with Pat and you tried to ask to go in the house?
Yeah, he said no.
And it was terrible.
Awful. It was terrible. So I remember the guy. It was our second or third knock on that house. And Pat, listen, it's a good look. It's a good look. It's a good look. And I still say it's a good look. Like everything to me is a good look. I'm like, oh, those Gucci's, that's a good look. Right?
Yeah.
That's my look.
Yeah.
So, but that's all I heard was, and so we were knocking that door. We were in a hood, and you prospect dots in a very systematic manner when you're doing takeovers. And it was a look, like even driving by, it was a look, had a good sign. It was a home. And so it was we had been by there a couple times. And the last time we went, I knocked on the door and the guy came out, and I'm like, literally, I mean, if I said much at all, it was, I'm Lee. I'm the alarm manager. Can I come in and take a look at your equipment? Because the takeover pitch is, hey, I'm Lee. I'm the alarm manager out here. Do you remember when you signed up with Joe Schmo Blow in 2016? Oh, you do? Perfect. That's exactly why I'm here. boom, on your iPad, you have a picture of the panel that was installed on their house. Or did you get this panel or that panel? And they're like, oh, I got that one. Okay, where did you put that? Oh, it's over here. Was it by the garage or was it? Okay, perfect. I'm just going to come in and take a look at that. But what you don't understand is it's not just the pitch, it's your mannerisms and it's the legitimacy,
posture.
it's everything. And they're just like, you expect to go in their house and they expect to let you in. And then as you're walking through, you're like, so I'm sure you guys have been thinking about the doorbell. Would you rather have a camera here? So you're selling, right? And that first, all I heard, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know what tonality was. I didn't know. I was like, you tell them your name, you tell them you're the alarm manager, and then you say, I want to come in and look at your equipment. And that's not what you do. And the guy was just like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And he like shut the door on us.
I can't imagine seeing you and Buff Pat at the door and you two asking a human to let me come inside the house. I mean, like, to me, that's just like, it's a little much.
Pat, dude, let me just tell you.
Pat's a big boy.
Pat is a big boy, but he is extraordinarily disarming on a door. He's one of the, like I've been knocking for 5 years, but listen, Kenny's a Jedi too. There's a lot of these guys are just assassins. There's something different in a veteran door knocker that it's almost, in my early career, I would say it's like, wow, it's like he just hypnotized that guy. And it almost is. It's like this instant conviction and like, hey, I'm here to sell your face and you're going to buy what I'm selling because that's what you're supposed to do. It's like this immediate transfer of energy through metaverbals, body language, tonality, presentation. There's so much that goes into it that the legitimacy is just instantly through the roof. And, Pat absolutely had that at that time of his career. I can't imagine what he has now. But yeah, that's what I was witnessing. And it was just, and as I've grown into the career and understand the complexities and the professionalism of what we do, that obviously is what I've, made my career. And I'm just in love with our job. But yeah, it was an interesting time. It was me and Pat, but he just disarm you. He just even me now, I'm a big 6'4". You've seen me knock. I mean, I'm 6'4", tattoos, painted finger. I had glitter on my fingernails, and I took my glove off, and I like literally
he was mesmerized.
I mesmerized him with my fingernails. It was amazing.
He didn't even want to buy solar for me because the guy with the nails
didn't come. That's right. So, but this is what we do. We get better as you go from rookie to senior, sophomore, senior, veteran. Like the things that you grow with and your knowledge base and how to knock doors and how to have those transactions with people was what I was witnessing with Pat. And, I did success leaves breadcrumbs. I'm a huge believer in that now. And I did not reinvent Pat's wheel. I just went out and I gave the alarm manager pitch and I sold faces, and so the interesting thing about that year was, I've never been low on the board. I've never been low on the leaderboard. I just haven't. I've always been on the top of the leaderboard in the sales offices. There's always been somebody that outworked me, that was willing to do 14, 15 hours a day. I'm a 8 to 12 hour guy, depending on where my numbers are. Very self-driven. But I got to, I think it was like late August or September, and Taylor comes along. And I'm not a leaderboard guy. I'm just not. I'm not a competitions guy. It's for Lee, it's Lee against Lee.
Simple.
And the guys like, Grinny, oh my gosh. Seth will literally die. He will die.
He knocked on a broken foot.
Bro, he will die on a competition. Like, yeah. I mean, if he had to go without food and water for 4 days, I think he would.
I know it. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So he loves competition. They stopped putting me in competitions because I would be doing, I'd have like 20, 25, and then I get in a competition and be like 1. The competition ruined me. There's something about me competing with myself and grinding through my own processes that really affect me. So I wasn't on the leaderboards. I didn't really pay attention to them. And at Vivint, you had these leaderboards. And Taylor comes to me towards the end of the year and he goes, "You're going to be rookie of the year." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Where? Here?" Like, I'm like, there's 2 of us and the other guy sucks. I'm at like almost 200 and he's got like 110. Like, of course not. He's like, "No, nationwide." He's like, "I really want you to be," because for Taylor, it was a notch in his belt too, because he had a, testament to John's recruiting abilities back then. He had a few rookies of the year under his belt, Mendez being another one. Pat.
Wow.
Pat was a rookie of the year. monster. So he's like, I really want you to get it. And I'm like, well, now I really want to get it too. And so that was one of the first times I ever got competitive. And it was another kid named Hightower, little blonde kid. And I met him and he was like, for some reason, I thought he was going to be this like, he's just a normal kid based out of San Francisco, just normal kid. But he was probably 20 deals behind me. And he was catching up fast. He was doing like, I would do like 4 or 5. He would do like 7. And so I went hard that last one and I beat him. I think he got 205 and I got 213 installed. So net. And yeah. So what the interesting part of that story is that the fear had pushed me that whole time. It was a competition against myself. It was a competition not to move my daughter into an apartment. It was a competition not pay my rent. It was a competition not to fail. I wasn't driven by anything other than the absolute need for success. And there was so much fear that I'm a very fear-based person. I don't want bad things to happen. I don't focus on bad things, but I know what happens if I don't do certain things, bad things will follow. And so that whole year was perpetuated by a fear of failure. And it took me to massive success. And so, I hear this when we're recruiting people and talking to people or reps are coming in. Fear will absolutely hold you down. Fear will absolutely lock you into a fixed mindset. Fear will keep you poor of mind, of spirit, of physical activity, and of finances. Fear of change, fear of the world, fear of all these things and the way that it's manipulated and used. If you're acted upon with fear rather than acting upon something, then you're always going to be in that same place that you always were. I'm scared. One of my heroes is David Goggins. I got a chance to meet him briefly, but Goggins is a very driven person, but he talks about the cookie jar and what's happened. And he says, all of the negative life experiences and the pains and everything that you've gone through, those nightmares there, you put those things in a cookie jar. And when you think it's hard, when you want to quit, you pull out one of those things, and if I'm honest with you, I mean, some of those are sitting in ADSEG. Some of those are administrative segregation for months at a time in a single cell where I get to go out and take a shower twice a week and I go into a little cage. Like, that's hard, man. That's hard. It's not hard to get in a fight. It's hard for the aftermath.
Right.
And I'm like, is this the hardest thing? And I'm like, no, it's not. And do I want to I'm more scared to move my daughter into an apartment. I'm more scared to regress. I'm more scared to relapse on drugs and alcohol. I'm more scared to do those things than I am of this thing. And I'm at this point in my life, over the last 5 years, I've become so scared of mediocrity. And again, Goggins, just to quote Goggins, he said, if you're not better today than you were tomorrow, you're worse. And I really predicate my life on continuing to get better and enhancing who I am on a daily basis. And listen, we talked to Bodie, and he's just an amazing human being, right? And one of these guys, he's like the Goggins of the door world, right? He's just an amazing human. I'm no Bodie Gardner. I'm not perfect in my everyday life, but I do constantly practice getting better. And so my fear in that first year is one of the things that drove my success. And then the amount of people that I talked to, I knocked so many doors that what people don't understand when they first get into this is how complex the job actually is and what it takes to become a professional, a veteran door knocker. And to become that, you have to knock and talk to an enormous and close and sell and be in enough homes to an enormous amount of people. And here's what we say when we're leading teams is we can't teach people time. So when does somebody get to be a manager? When do they get to become a leader? Well, even if somebody's selling at a high rate, that doesn't mean that he can be a manager or a leader yet. And the difference between a manager and a leader is a manager manages, situations, and a leader teaches other people how to become a leader through servitude, purely servitude. But just because a guy is selling at a high volume doesn't mean he has the quality characteristics that are needed to learn through time. So we can't teach guys time. There are so many aspects of the job, but knocking as many doors as possible in as many years as possible just accelerates the type of human being you are.
No, that's good shit, and a lot of nuggets too. And especially for me, like, I wrote down something earlier, which was like, you talked about when in your previous life, and it's very much like you've had two lives.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know if it's like a second chance. It's just another one. And you talked about how, when you're locked in a cell or in prison or whatever, even previously before, when your mother was this or that and you were alone and living off the Social Security, you practice this mental fortitude of being alone. And I think, and I don't know, maybe you have thought about this, but it just dawned on me. It's like, we look at like, because I've been thinking about this with myself. Like everyone's like, oh, get a big why. We talk about big why. And I'm like, man, I got a pretty big why, in my opinion, right now. In my opinion, I got a pretty big why. And over the last year being on doors, it's gotten bigger, right? I've always had a why. I found it, but now it's bigger, right? But a big why without action is purely fantasy. And like, and I've realized that with myself because of, I think, how successful I have been the last 2 or 3 months versus, and it's funny because I think I've done more deals the last 2 months than I did all year because of where I was from January to April, right? And so that all encompassing in itself, right? With proper action behind the why, right? For you got used to being alone.
Yeah.
You got used to being alone, and then you were given this opportunity by JJ and
Jeff.
And Jeff to go work for Presidential, and it was secure for the first time in your life. It was secure. I knew where I needed to be, when I needed to be there, why I needed to be there, etc. What I needed to do, when I needed to do it, all that shit, right? And all that being said, then you had to be alone again, and you knew how to be alone, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what people don't it's funny because we got a couple guys that work here that are like, they're knocking with each other, and then you're like, well, why'd you knock with each other? And they're like, well, to kind of, just to break up the monotony. And it's like, no, homie, the worst thing you can do is go be with somebody else right now.
Yeah.
Because you haven't earned the stripes of being with somebody else.
Blind leading the blind. Literally.
And so you have, you talk about all these things that it's funny now too. Like, we've introduced some new platforms here, and I was talking to Sam, and he's like, what do I do about these? And I'm like, it was funny. I was explaining to him about looks even now. And he's a veteran. I mean, the guy can knock the door, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But how to manage a hood better. And I'm like, oh, it's literally the same conversation you and I had back when we knocked the Pat Mendez hood.
Yep.
And now I can see it completely in front of, like, oh shit, that's right. But it's like you said, it's with time. So wrapping all that up, you sell 213 your first year, you get rookie of the year at Vivint. I mean, you just listed all the guys that taught you how to knock doors. I mean, I don't know if there's any, the greatest that have ever done it, in my opinion. You come from the Bodie Gardner lineage. I mean, that's the real authentic lineage of doors.
Absolutely.
So what did year 2 look like?
Year 2 was very similar. The interesting thing about our industry is nobody gives a shit about what you did last year. Nobody. It's meaningless because in Vivint or in any sales org, when you get to the new fiscal year, you've done 0. So, October 1 at Vivint, you've done 0. So it was just the same thing, and I had this, I don't know, I had started envisioning like, what was the rookie of the year going to look like? Like, I was like, oh, they're going to fly me to Salt Lake, and they're going to put me on this. This is literally what I thought. They're going to put me on this stage at the Vivint Arena, and Todd's going to be up there, and, they're going to be giving away all these cool awards for the cup. And, and then they're going to say, and for the rookie of the year, it was Lee Barber. And I was going to go up to the stage in my Vivint shirt. Yeah, absolutely not, man. We were at Pirates Cove on the regional retreat. I was in board shorts, just came out of a pool. Kenny Cox is handing out trophies for, vet of the year. And he's like, and Lee Barber, 213, rookie of the year. And that was it. And then October 1, done. New year. Start again, kid. You ain't shit. So, the second year was very similar. I think I did 186 alarms in my second year, because by the second year, at the very end, I started getting into solar. So, at that point in the game, and you and I have talked about this, man, alarms to me are Listen, I love alarms, and I love Vivint, and I don't care what anybody says about Vivint. I fucking love Vivint. I just do. I love fucking Vivint. I love the humans that came from there, and anybody that trash talks Vivint, I think is bullshit. I think their culture's money. The lineage that I came from. Listen, it's servitude. It's making humans better. It's hands on hands. It's like, come up here. Listen, why do I want you to come up here? So I can move back. Success is predicated on all of our success together, and learning and books and culture and grinding and hard work. It's a brother and sisterhood of being a better human, of bringing a good value. And listen, Bodie and Casey and Poppy and Kenny and John Taylor and Jeremy, this isn't no Huckleberry sales shit. I'm here to sell you an alarm, right? I'm here to sell your face. And it's the same thing with solar. Like, I'm here to sell you solar. I'm not talking about some bullshit, a net metering. I'm working with NV Energy and like this dumbass, just garbage sales tactics that guys use. We're here to sell your face. And I'm going to do it because that's what I do. And that's where I came from. And I have a huge, huge debt of gratitude, love, and respect for that entire process, because it's real salesmanship. It's the real deal. It's be the best, most honest, integrity human being that you can be, that's constantly learning, that's constantly serving his people, that's constantly serving his customers, that's bringing a good, solid product to the market, that can show his face in his own community, that his people know who he is, they're paid right, his customer knows who he is, they're taken care of right. That's where I came from. And anybody that wants to talk shit on that, I don't want to hear it. I don't. I love it. And that's who we are today. Our team now is built on that same type of character and foundation. And, I absolutely love it. And we look at some other sales organizations. Legacy is one. Doug and Luke and Seth, what they have done there. It's an amazing sales organization. And you see, we watch their Instagrams and what they're doing with their guy. And it's the same thing. This is how you build a good sales organization. It's built on the foundation of caring about your people and leading through servitude. Listen, we talked to Seth, and what does Seth say? Like, quit treating people like dollar bills. People are people, man. Love them, take care of them, bring them up, put your hand on their hand, bring them up. And that's where I come from. And that's what this company is about. So, I didn't mean to kind of,
No, it's a good look.
but that's what Vivint is to me. And I have, I've had personality clashes with different people in the industry, but it absolutely does not take away from my debt of gratitude for the way that they changed my life. I will never forget those things. And no matter what happens in life, I have to keep my side of the street clean. And I don't know really any terrible people in this industry. I don't. Everybody that I know, even remotely, are good people. But I never lose my gratitude. I never lose my thankfulness, because if I do, I'm shitting on where I came from and
Right.
what I'm built from. And I
Right.
just don't do that. So I love it. And I have gratitude. This industry is, you now get to see it. We change people's lives. We change their lives. We pull them up. It's almost like, when Neo woke up in the bubble and got flushed down that toilet, and they're like, hey, you're in the real world now. We get to wake people up. We get to make them test themselves, get fortitude, get grit, get tenacity, and see who they really are, and then become a professional salesperson, and then thrive in the world. And then those people get to help other people, right? That's what this industry and this job has done for me and what it means to me. I'm in love with it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday too, especially just like once, I don't know. We even had somebody recently come in, and they spent a couple days with somebody, and then they went out on their own, and they're like, I can't do it. And like, it's not like I'm trying to be rude or disrespectful or be like, I'm better than you, but I just love it when, we had a guy last year, you probably don't even remember, he lasted half a day, right? And you're like, he's like, bringing back the slicks in the shirt, and like,
I remember.
this isn't for me, and you're like, and I just like, because bro, like, dude, there's been times in the last year, man, like, because even when I sold roofing, man, we did mailers and then all that shit, and then we ran with it, and like, I didn't have any training, I didn't even have any help, I figured it out all myself, and I made a
shit ton of money. So I was like, oh, this is super easy.
Mm.
People highly underestimate. And I think about this too, especially because hopefully soon I can go sell a little bit in Southern California. I can go sell a little bit in Texas. I could even maybe go back to South Carolina and have the skills that I have now for there.
Mm.
Because I'm like, people underestimate selling in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
Like, I don't, even Pessy, when we had him here for dinner,
No joke.
he got off and he got in the car and he was like, bro, how, in the middle of June, I think it was,
Mhm.
July, how do you sell in this heat?
Mhm.
And I was like, that's right. You know what I'm saying?
Fucking
Like,
gladiators.
you know what I mean? And because I don't know, like, I don't know if people understand the market here and what it's like.
Mhm.
And I think, I've obviously agree with you 100%. Like you know, it takes a while. I mean, I tell that to everybody now when I recruit them. It's like, bro, you need to give us a year. You need to make a 1-year commitment, and you need to and Poppy said it beautifully. Like, I'm not selling you on this is going to be the easiest thing you've ever done your whole life. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done, but more rewarding than anything you've ever done in your bit, in financially, right?
Well, spiritually and mentally too.
Right. Yeah. No, good point.
Yeah, when you listen, you have to. So I do remember the guy, and I listen, and not to say that I don't care about people, because I absolutely do. But when somebody quits this job, it physically pumps me up. It does. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what I'm made of. You can't, because this job. You can, but you can't. You told yourself you can't. You quit. It was too hard for you. And, one of the things that I've grasped onto when we're looking at the company wide, is we don't want to hire people to motivate them. We want to hire motivated people. I don't want to hire people with fixed mindsets. I want to hire people with abundance mindsets. Those type of people have this innate ability to just believe that they can. And, I've seen you go through the cool thing about this industry, and I've told you this a million times, and you now say it, and I got it from Poppy and Casey. So listen, bro, the content that I have, I'm literally like a smorgasbord of like all the people that I respect.
Right.
Don't overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 5. And so I've been here for 5 years, and you've been in with me for a year, but looking from my lens at you, now I've watched you get to watch your lens into your people. And so we start to see this miraculous transformation that happens with people when they're going through these levels of self-conflict, because it is easy to quit. It's so easy. And that's what gets me pumped up, is when I see other people quit, it literally just lights a fire in me, and just that passion. I'm like, you know what I never did? You know what I never did? I never quit. I never quit. And it's okay. Listen, I'm not judging you for quitting. That's not my situation. Do your thing.
Yeah.
But I don't quit. And we get to see this growth. Listen, and Mendez said it the best. Poppy said it the best. And I think it was number 4 on his outro from Vivint. I think he had like 51 takeaways. And it stuck with me, and you've heard me say it, is don't define success by, define your success by the sowing and not the reaping, meaning sowing the fields. So what we're doing in our industry, in our company, in our sales lineages, because we come from these guys, is that we're sowing the seeds of success in other human beings. We grow, right? And we're going through the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. We know that one of the most important laws is the law of the lid, right? If your people grow into you, we look at, like, recruiting cap. Like, if you can't recruit somebody that's better than you, it's just not physically possible. So you have to constantly grow as a person, so you can teach the people below you how to grow as people. So we're constantly in this evolutionary process of our mental, spiritual, and physical aspects to become better salespeople. And really, it's not just sales, it's leadership. And leadership is servitude. And I have the lens of watching you over the last year go through battles that I went through. And it's unique because I understand, and I understand how that feels. And, like Grenny's been in 8 years. He gets to see me go through some of the transgressions and things that he's gone through. And now I get to watch you see that. And I've seen you just in the last, 3 or 4 months, just fall in love with humans. Just the very process. There's literally nothing that gives a greater gift than pouring yourself freely into another person and understanding how important it is for you to be a good person, to be a good leader, to have knowledge base, to be able to help them when they're not right, and to give that to that person and watch them walk through that. When Kelly Rawlings said, if you think knocking doors is what we do, you're missing 50%. It's 1/50th. And the nature of our job is to make other human beings better gladiators in life. And that means for their families, for their friends, for their people, their decision-making abilities, their financial abilities. And what's happened is exactly what Poppy said, is my hands are constantly in the dirt. I'm constantly moving forward, planting, sowing the seeds. And, I've been very fortunate. I'm a very hard worker. I'm very consistent. I'm definitely no Grinny. Grinny, listen, Seth's one of the hardest knockers I've ever met in my life. I've knocked next to Seth. He's a beast in an office. What I am is I'm extraordinarily consistent, right? Meaning if I'm on doors for 9 hours, Seth was on doors for 15 hours. And Seth is he's just another kind of human being. He's like a Goggins of door knocking. But what's happened is I've constantly focused my sowing on the people and the sales and the customers and doing the right thing and having integrity. And what happens is behind me, the financial crops just flourish and grow and flourish and grow. And I don't focus on that because I'm not focused on the money. It's one of the last things I'm focused on. I'm focused on the people. And when you focus on the people and you remove your ego, you get up in the morning, in your early career, and you probably go through this now because you're in a leadership position, but also in a sales position where you go, I got to get a deal. I got to get an AC. I got to get a deal. But then it changes into, I got to get a deal and I got to get a recruit. And then it's like, okay, I got a deal. Now I got to train the recruit. And it's this constant thing of like you going through these processes and making sure that you're committed and focused on other people. And that's where you find a complete lack of ego. It's, because there should be no ego in leadership. There should be pride in the fact of, hey, I'm proud of my team. I'm proud of our culture. I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of our accomplishments. But I don't need to be the big guy in the room. I need to be the biggest server in the room. I need to be the biggest help in the room. And to me, that's leadership. And that's what we do. And I've seen you start to do. So so shout out to you. I'm very proud of you and everything that we built here.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Same. I appreciate that. And I think like you don't really expect, I don't know. I don't even know what I expected when I did it. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. And like
you don't know.
No, you don't know. And like
know.
even yesterday, like my girlfriend's always, shout out to Brooklyn. She's always trying to recruit because she's seen it in firsthand. And like I think her way of appreciating it is I'm gonna help to recruit people. And it's funny because I watch even yesterday, she's like talking to this manager of this restaurant, and the manager's complaining about her job, and Brooklyn's like, oh yeah, there's this thing, my boyfriend, And it's funny now after recruiting, I don't know, 15, 20, however many, 25 people, let's say, and 10 of them have left, right?
Yep.
Not too bad at all.
Not
You
shabby.
can just see it. You can just see it on the person from the get-go.
Mhm.
And she's like, oh, I'm going to get her. And I'm like, no, I'm like, that's a dead deal. And it's just like you said, it's literally the same as selling a deal.
Mhm.
I know, even the other day, I think I went 20 for 20 or something, and I finally hit a wall. This airline pilot, and I watched, and it's funny now doing this for only a year, but
it's hard to compete with free travel.
Literally, it is hard to compete with free travel. No, you're right.
That's hard.
And well, I was trying to sell him, not to get him to come work with us, but yeah, good
Gotcha.
play. But I watched it after 30 minutes. I watched the deal die. And then I watched it happen in real time, and I was like, in my mind, I'm like, this is a dead. I knew immediately. I watched what happened, and then I spent another hour trying to fix it, knowing it was. I got to think about it. I got to think about it. I got to think about it because I lost composure. But then leaving that deal, going like, fuck yeah, like knowing that, like, oh, I can see it. I get it, and so we're getting on a time constraint here, but for you, and. Where do you see the train going at the moment? Like, what's your plan? And like, what where do you see all of this stuff moving going forward for you right now?
So that's a great question. I don't mean this to tout my own horn, but I do want to talk. So this year I was approved by the Las Vegas or Nevada Contractors Board for a C15 roofing contractor's license. And when I started that process, I didn't start that process thinking I'm a convicted felon. They're going to say no. I started that process by thinking there's no way that and I had to go before the Nevada State Contractors Board, and I had to write letters, and it was a much
lengthy process.
For other people, it's 2 months. For me, it was 8 months.
Yeah.
But everything that I had done in my past over these, the past 10 years built upon my belief that I could do anything. And there was nothing that says, oh, this or that's going to stop me. So where I see things going is just up. Casey said it the best. So first of all, I'm going to be the first millionaire in my family. That's absolutely, with the roofing company, that should happen pretty quick. But that's from a kid with nothing. And you have helped me in my life, because you're one of those people who, Brooke helps you to want bigger and better. And you've helped me because, just the way that you think, it helps me say, oh, maybe that goal is too small. And I had this goal for $5 million. And, my goal right now is I'm 46, and by the time I'm 55, I'd like to have accomplished $50 million. I don't know. I have a 5-year plan. And I have a 10-year goal, but it's a lot like Casey said. I love what Casey said, is as long as driving down the road at night in your car and you have the high beams on, as long as you're on the right road, right? And you have your goals. And what that means is the high beams are your goals. So we can really kind of see as far as our high beams go. But we can't see all of the destinations past that. So what I want is, I want massive growth for my people. I want, an abundant lifestyle for my daughter, meaning mentally, primarily. I don't want her, I've broken the chain of addiction in my family. I've been reconnected with my first daughter, Alexis. So we've had a really amazing opportunity.
Powerful.
To be the father that I should have been. It's amazing. So where things will go really are only up. And that's predicated on, it's based on who I am as a person and how much I can serve my team and my people. And my people, my family, my daughter, my wife, you, because you're not just on my team, but you're my business partner in the podcast, but also my good friend, and have become one of my closest advisors, because I trust you. So yeah, $50 million in the next 10 years. And now I've started to see, because you see guys like Casey and these guys, and we're not going to talk about how much money they got, but they got a few bucks.
Yeah.
And just like that recruiting table with Justin, I'm like, well, if Justin can do it,
yeah,
I can do it.
Right.
And I'm not reinventing any wheels here.
Right.
Lead with servitude.
Right.
Build.
Yeah. Pull
in the Tetris pieces. Success leaves breadcrumbs. Pick as many of them up as you can. Continue to read, continue to grow, continue to lead, continue to serve, continue to be a good husband, continue to be a good father, continue to be a good man, and then just work hard. Like I work, I work, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with work. It's all I think about. And I'm married to my business partner, right? So if I'm not I just thought of this. The only two places the other day was the only two places I'm literally not working is when I'm at the gym and when I'm with my daughter.
Right.
Everything else is work. It's just, I'm obsessed.
That's
so
good.
I don't know where it's going, but it's going up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, congratulations on the roofing thing, because I know we started talking about that a year ago, and I know how hard it is. That's why I was like, hey, you want to go do it? Because I'm not even going to try, because I don't even care to try. But I know how. So congratulations on that. And I know even this office that we have down here, and you've done that for me, right? You've led me this whole time, and we've been through a lot in the last year, probably a little bit more than most. But the one thing that's never changed, and I think that's what, you look at guys like, you look at Jeff, Pat, and Casey, Jeff, Casey, and Bodie. You look at Pat and Nico. You look at all these guys, Seth and Luke and Doug, and you just look at these guys that have built this thing. Yeah, right. They don't Cam. The hidden treasure.
Cam's the man behind that curtain,
right?
But Seth said he doesn't know what he does. I told him he's probably just classify him as a team snatcher.
Literally, team snatcher.
I love Cam.
He's a good human. You see these things being built in this manner, and it's never alone. And so, it's good that everyone got to hear what you had to say, and I'm grateful that you did this. There's a lot going on today. It's a Saturday, but I'm glad we finally got to do this one as well. We've been trying for a little bit, and I'm sure everyone will be pretty pumped to hear this. And so, you go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. And I just wanted to take the last moment to thank all of our listeners. I had the luxury of listening to Nico, not because I'm usually on our podcast, Man Behind the Curtain, but I got the opportunity to listen to Nico, not in the first person, but in my car. And I really got a sense of what our listeners get to partake in. And I'm grateful for you and your creative vision for the Door Knocker podcast and who you are as the voice and creative side of our podcast, but also to our listeners. I love the door-to-door and sales community, and I want to thank all of our listeners and the people who are fans. And a lot of them reach out to you, and I have an immense amount of gratitude for that, and you absolutely deserve it. But it feels good to serve our community in the facts that we do. And I wanted the kind of end message of our podcast to be that it doesn't matter if you grew up in Utah and you went on an LDS mission. It doesn't matter if you grew up on the streets and you were just some street kid. It doesn't matter if you're just some guy out of, that had a normal childhood in Los Angeles or what doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't matter where you came from. If you want to do this job and you can overcome your fear, you can have more than a great financial career in this community. You can have an amazing spiritual, family, mental, the whole person paradigm can be met in this for you growing into the type of person you need to be. My advice is to pick your leaders and the people that you admire carefully. You will be an equivalent of the closest five. But I want to thank our listeners for following the show and listening to our content and giving us the opportunity to serve the community more. So I appreciate all of our listeners.
Yeah, same. And I don't really have much to add. So thanks, bro.
Thank you.
All right.